Hello, and let's talk about Ranjan Gogoi's nomination to the Rajya Sabha. The notification for the same was released yesterday, sparking off an immediate controversy, with legal experts and commentators wondering about the propriety of the move. This is the first time a former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has been nominated by the President to the Rajya Sabha. The question is, what signal does this send to the judiciary as a whole at a time of heightened polarization, when so many cases of extreme significance for society are being heard by the judiciary? What signal does it send to the people who look up to the judiciary as an independent pillar in India, a pillar which they hope will deliver justice irrespective of political affiliation? We'll talk more about this, but first here are some facts about the case. Justice Ranjan Gogoi was the 46th Chief Justice of the country who served in that position from October 2018 to November 2019. On January 12, 2018, he, along with Justices J. Chalmeshwar, Madan Lokur and Kurian Joseph, held an unprecedented press conference raising questions on the allocation of cases under the then Chief Justice Deepak Mishra. They had warned that the problems affecting the judiciary could threaten democracy in the country itself. After Justice Mishra's retirement, Gogoi became the next Chief Justice. He headed benches which heard a number of controversial cases. The most significant one was the verdict on Ayodhya, where the court permitted the construction of a temple in the disputed spot. A bench headed by him also heard a review petition against the iconic Sabarimala judgment and referred a larger set of religious issues, including the entry of women into mosques, to a larger bench. Another bench headed by him also gave a clean chit to the government in the Rafale fighter jet case. In April last year, he was accused of sexual harassment by a former Supreme Court employee. He was cleared in the case by a 3-judge team shortly after. Other controversies during his tenure included the delay in the hearing of petitions related to the abrogation of Article 370 of the Constitution and the shutdown in Kashmir, as well as the Supreme Court Collegium reversing its decision to transfer Justice Akhil Qureshi to the Madhya Pradesh High Court and instead transferring him to Tripura High Court. Opposition parties have criticized the nomination. CPIM General Secretary Sitaram Yechuri recalled Gogoi's own words that there is a strong viewpoint that post-retirement appointments is a scar on the independence of judiciary. Yechuri asked what one should make of a government which does so. The Congress also criticized the decision, with its official spokesperson calling it a sad day. We have with us senior journalist Paranjoy Guha Thakurta to talk about this issue. Thank you, Paranjoy, for joining us. So, Paranjoy, first of all, the timing is very unfortunate, to put it very kindly. It's just a few months after his
just
retirement.
4 months. I mean,
Exactly.
look, his last day as the Chief Justice of India was the 19th of November 2019.
Right.
4 months.
Right.
Now, it's not as if he is the first Chief Justice who's becoming a member of Parliament, of the upper house of Parliament, the Rajya Sabha. So let's go back in time and a few examples. First, and obviously the most prominent one, was the former Chief Justice of India, Ranganath Mishra. Right. Now, he had probed the anti-Sikh riots in Delhi in November 1984, given a clean chit to the Congress government. And remember, he had become chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. Then he joined the Congress party. And most importantly, he was elected, not nominated, to the upper house of Parliament. And this was a good 7 years after he stepped down as the Chief Justice of India. Two other examples. Another former Chief Justice of India, Justice Hidayatullah, M. Hidayatullah, he had been appointed Vice President of India, but this was almost nearly 9 years after he retired from the Supreme Court. This is in 1970. Then the first woman judge in the Supreme Court of India, Justice Fatima Bibi, became the governor of Tamil Nadu in 1997, roughly 5 years after she retired as a judge in 1992. As you mentioned, what has surprised everybody is that this was the same judge, together with Justice Chalmeshwar, Madan Lokur, Kurian Joseph, who was very critical about the way in which his predecessor, Deepak Mishra, was constituting benches. That this person should then be, willing to accept this position as early as that. The point you made on this whole issue of post-retirement jobs for judges. It's not just Justice Gogoi himself who called it a scar on the judiciary. Remember, the then leader of the opposition, Arun Jaitley, way back in 2012, and I quote him, this is what he said on the floor of the Rajya Sabha. Pre-retirement judgments are influenced by a desire for a post-retirement job.
Right.
So my suggestion, this is Mr. Jaitley's suggestion, is that for 2 years after retirement, there should be a gap before a new appointment, because otherwise the government can directly or indirectly influence the courts, and the dream to have an independent, impartial and fair judiciary in the country would never actualize. Close quote. This is Arun Jaitley. Now remember, Mr. Jaitley is no more with us, but this is what he said. Now the point is, he's not alone. Remember, I actually was going through my notes and I came across an academic paper published in October 2018 by 3 persons, Madhav Vani, Subhankar Dam, Giovanni Co. And look at the title. It's called Jobs for Justice, and within brackets S for Jobs for Justices, it means. And the title, the subtitle, Corruption in the Supreme Court of India. Now look at this. Now I am saying, when you look at all, you read out the whole set of judgments that you talked about, whether it be Rafael, whether it be Sabrimala, whether it be the Ayodhya. There are many, many other judgments. All of it, people are wondering, is it a coincidence that all these judgments were in favor of the government? Now,
and like you said, it's especially ironic because the BJP has been in the forefront of this whole argument against the Congress especially. It happened with Ranganath Mishra and many other instances, them saying that, this is a misuse of power.
Now you also remember, there's one other instance that I forgot to mention. Justice P. Sadasivam. After he retired as Chief Justice of India, he was appointed the Governor of Kerala in September 2014. That's after he retired in April the same year. That is, now please understand that just because the Congress government has done some terrible things in the past, does it justify what has happened? And let me here quote 2 individuals. One is the Supreme Court lawyer Gautam Bhatia. He tweeted, "It took a while for what was implicit to become evident, but the independent judiciary is now officially dead." Close quote. This is what Mr. Gautam Bhatia says. Sanjay Hegde, who's a senior advocate of the Supreme Court, he has been quoted as saying, he, meaning Justice Gogoi, has not been just to his own judicial record. Now, he has also imperiled the independence and impartiality of fellow judges who sat with him. So whether it be the sexual harassment the case, whether it be his views strongly defending the National Register of Citizens in Assam, and he's of course from Assam, all of these have made this situation such that people are wondering. And remember, has he been fair to himself? Because after all, in that very famous January 2018, when the 4 sitting judges of the Supreme Court addressed the press conference, and he had, at that point of time, suggested, he was willing to name Justice Loya and the assignment of that case to Justice Arun Mishra's bench. And surely it was by any standards an extraordinary media conference. But the short point is, the Supreme Court didn't go ahead with the investigation on the death of Judge Loya.
Right. So the key question there before now a lot of people is that what steps actually can be taken to even say, it's a different question whether the government would do that, but in terms of structural reforms, because like we said, this is
to start with, why doesn't the government listen to the advice of its own former finance minister and say, let's have a cooling off period of about 2 months before a judge, any judge, including the Chief Justice of India, is given another appointment. So that he's not seen to be, the allurement, the lure of a post-retirement job is not perceived to be influencing his decisions.
And there's also definitely a major, say, a structural difference between, say, heading a commission, heading an inquiry, a body of inquiry, heading a body which has, say, judicial functions, and being a member of parliament where where the vote is often on
I understand
political lines.
Mr. Justice Gogoi will be coming to Delhi and justifying what he did. We have some quotes from him in the Times of India, where he says, look, it's important to bridge the gap between the executive and the judiciary. But really, what has happened is truly amazing. And I must tell you a whole lot of things. I mean, you can argue that many of the judgments that Justice Gogoi gave were laudable, deserves to be complimented and not criticized, any of them, you name it. And so we don't go into just Ayodhya or Rafale or Sabrimala or Triple Talaq or even the contempt petition against Rahul Gandhi or you can say, okay, he gave great judgments in the case of GST evaders, and one can, go through his own track record and say, okay, he said he bought the Office of the Chief Justice of India within the purview of the Right to Information Act. This whole reviewing, he stuck to the guns when it came to reviewing the collegium system for appointment of judges, and you've just mentioned at least one controversial appointment. Then a whole lot of other issues on tribunals and the Finance Act of 2015. One can go and say, okay, he did all these things. But then on the other side, in the sexual harassment case, he became or sought to become a judge in his own case.
Right.
And look, this whole sealed cover business suddenly has become so evident. And this whole thing about, it started with Pratik Hajela and the Apex Court asking him, he was the state coordinator of the National Register of Citizens in Assam, to give, information in a sealed cover, which would not be shown to anybody. And then it went on to the former head of the Central Bureau of Investigation, Alok Verma, who, as you know, had this rather public spat with his second-in-command, Rakesh Asthana. And then it became a norm almost. Bhima Koregaon case, the bail plea of the former Finance Minister Chidambaram, the Rafale case, and so on and so forth. So the question is whether this whole business of a sealed cover being given only for the eyes of the Supreme Court, whether this is a healthy practice or not. So I think at the end of the day, Justice Ranjan Gogoi, who was called a revolutionary judge, and even before he became the Chief Justice, we'll have to wait and watch his track record in the upper house of Parliament. But let's put it this way. I don't think controversy is going to leave him behind.
Right. And there's also very bad precedent, because the same practice, then the possibility of it happening in states also, it's already definitely happening, but the further possibility of it happening in states, and this becoming a countrywide norm, means the erosion of one more pillar of the state, so to speak.
And remember, this is the same person, Justice Ranjan Gogoi, in July 2018, speaking at a public function organized by the Indian Express. He says, independent journalists and noisy judges are democracy's first line of defense. Right. So the question is, how faithful has he been to his own words? And as you yourself said, this whole allurement of post-retirement jobs, why it's a scar on the judiciary.
Thank you so much, Paranjoy.
My pleasure.
In our next stories, a few days ago, an audio clip went viral of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman berating State Bank of India Chairman Rajneesh Kumar for the bank's alleged failure in operationalizing accounts of tea workers in Assam. We spoke to former General Secretary of the All India Bank Officers Confederation, Thomas Franco, on the issue. Here is what he had to say.
A finance minister of a country should not talk like this. SBI chairman is one of the senior most officers with 40 years of experience in banking. And she was almost ridiculing him, saying the bank is heartless, you have become inefficient, come and meet me in Delhi. She travelled with him to Guwahati for this meeting alone. It was at the request of Finance Ministry, this outreach program was arranged, where other bank officials were there, very junior officials, government officials were there, state ministers of Assam were there, where she is making such a scathing attack to prove that she is so powerful. The manner in which she is speaking, the face she is showing, it shows that she is so arrogant. And what is the reason? The reason was that in the state of Assam, in the estates, tea estate workers did not get their salary because their accounts were not KYC compliant. That is as per the instructions of the Reserve Bank of India, which had said that you give notice, and then if they don't provide the KYC, then you will have to freeze the account. That's what was done. That was known to the state government. Now the state government has come with an idea that yes, their KYC is not okay. Aadhaar and voter card does not match. Ration card does not match. So we will give a certificate by our own revenue officials to show that they are citizens of that place and they are residing there. Using that, you make it KYC compliant. This should have been done by the government much earlier. So instead of doing that, accusing the bank as a whole and banking industry and rebuking the state bank chairman is not at all warranted. She should rather apologize for the kind of policy she is following. The economy is not reviving at all. For that, I think she should resign. But for this issue, I demand that she should apologize to the banking industry.
So do you think that her failure as a finance minister in reviving the economy, is she trying to pass the buck to the bankers, which is not at all, acceptable, because the finance minister has to guide when the bankers has to implement. She is trying to make it vice versa. Is that she is trying to do, and making the customers feel that the banks are working against them?
Just one day before the Guwahati meeting, she addressed bankers in a meeting arranged by Indian Banks Association, where all bankers were there, in which she is showing her arrogance, where she is saying that the banks have become inefficient, you are disconnected from the people, your people at the grassroots, they don't know what are the government schemes, you are following only credit rating, you don't have connect with the customer while giving loan, you just depend on the credit rating agencies. I am accessible to you, but you are not accessible to the public, the customers. Now, to some extent, there is a disconnect, I agree, for which the government alone is responsible. Now what she is trying is that there is so much of failure of the governments which started with demonetization. They are not able to revive the economy. They are giving more and more concession to the corporates, which is not helping the economy. Instead of reorienting the policies, they are still defending their policies. So they want a scapegoat. So she has found here the bankers as a scapegoat, and unfortunately, a finance minister is trying to turn the customers against the bankers, which is not at all correct. If the bankers, 10 lakh of them who are in this country, if they decide that they will go slow on the loans, that will further deteriorate the economy. There are 101 reasons for which you can turn the loan that this is not eligible. But they are not doing it because they are more patriotic. They are more concerned about the bank. They are more concerned about the citizens of the country. But what she is attempting to do is to put the entire blame on the banking industry for whatever failure the government has done. If I say one by one. Now she says there is disconnect. I quote you some examples. Who opened 31 crore Jan Dhan accounts? for which the government got credit, the Prime Minister got credit that he entered the Guinness Book of Records. Is it the Finance Ministry? It is the grassroots level bankers. Only 3% of the accounts were opened by the private sector banks. The rest was all by the public sector banks. Who is giving the mudra loans? Again, the majority of the loans are given by the public sector banks. Who took care of demonetization? The brunt of the attack of people was only on the staff. Government was not questioned. But public was coming and standing in the queue and abusing the bankers. There has been 16 deaths during demonetizations. Employees dying. More than 100 deaths of public. The government has not done anything. It has not even paid the compensation for that period. In spite of that, the bankers are working hard, reaching all the government schemes. How can she say that you have disconnect? I said there is some disconnect. Yes, that is because it is this government which brought in agencies like McKinsey, Boston Consultancy Group to reorient the banking system. It was McKinsey's recommendation which said that you reduce the staff at the branch level, let the processing of loans be done at a centralized processing center. So branch manager has become a postman. He just forwards the application. Naturally, there will be some disconnect. Then employment. The last 7 years, the business of the bank's deposit advances has doubled, whereas the staff strength has come down by 30,000. How will you have connect with the customers when your business is increasing, number of customers are increasing, number of loans are increasing? There will be definitely disconnect. And this disconnect was brought by the government. It pushed digitization so much and told the banks not to increase the staff strength. Now, if she has really realized it, she should say that yes, it is our mistake. We accept the mistake. Let us have more number of branches. Let us have more number of staff. Let us not do merger. Let us not close down regional rural banks. Let us not close down rural branches. Then the banking sector will improve. The real connect which existed before will come again.
That's all we have in this episode of Let's Talk. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. with the latest news developments of the day. Until then, keep watching NewsClick.